Hi everybody, my name is Laura Hill. I head up Cloud Essentials in the UK region. So this webinar today is part of a regular series of webinars and events that we are hosting this year around Microsoft Purview, which are these features that Microsoft give you to create the conditions for compliance, for governance across your data growing in Microsoft Cloud. So our aim with this session today and all of these webinars and our ebooks and our blogs is to impart some knowledge to you as a partner, as a Microsoft partner, and share some lessons that we have learned. So if you've not subscribed already to our content, please do so via the link in the chat to receive regular insights from our technical team, but also our compliance team as well. And quite active on LinkedIn as a team, so please do connect, and we'll put our profile links here in the chat. So welcome to the session. You're going to hear today from two presenters representing quite different perspectives when it comes to technology and risk, as we hone in today on one set of features within Microsoft Purview called Compliance Manager. So to introduce my colleagues, Johan van Schalkwerk is our Microsoft 365 technical lead, and he brings years and years of experience from an in-depth technical perspective. Nivasha Sanalal is our compliance and risk officer. She's from a financial background and brings expertise from an assurance perspective. And our aim today is to leave you with a better understanding of how you can practically use Compliance Manager to understand your compliance position, to understand how the controls work and what that means for your overall compliance strategy, to help you understand how you'd go about taking actions within and using Compliance Manager to give you confidence in the reporting that you're seeing and bring it to life a bit, and also opportunity to ask questions to the panel of experts that we've got today. So the format for the session is mics off as we present the content to you. We'd love to capture some input from you shortly via a QR code, so please have your phones at the ready. And type questions as we go in the Q&A in the chat, and we'll tackle them certainly at the end or as we go through if the flow of the conversation works. So just to give a little bit of background for those who aren't familiar with Cloud Essentials, we are a long-standing Microsoft partner around the area of content management. So the experience that we share with you today is because at any given time, our team are running programs of work to help our clients, primarily in regulated industries, to manage their content within Microsoft Cloud, so to really reduce the risk profile of that content as it grows and grows within Microsoft 365. Migration and management of that, often high volumes and complex content, managing that cost effectively, and ultimately being able to sort of open up the value in all of that content that is accumulating using things like AI so that it can be surfaced as knowledge and used to your business advantage. So we're a specialist partner when it comes to Microsoft Purview. So Purview is the name of this family of features really from Microsoft that can help you implement data governance, keep your house in order, help you protect your data, help you improve your compliance stance and the way that you are managing risk across all of that data. And you get various degrees of capability depending on your Microsoft 365 license subscription. And it will give you coverage of all of the data that you have in Microsoft 365, which is often largely unstructured data. It's your email, it's your file in SharePoint, it's content in Teams and OneDrive, but also can extend across other data sources. And this is very much the direction that Microsoft are going in with Purview, to kind of extend that capability across other platforms and other repositories of data and across multi-cloud. So it's very, Purview, it contains very powerful features. But what you'll find with Purview adoption and deployment is that you can't necessarily treat the rollout of it in the same way that maybe you could treat security feature sets or other configurations within your tenant. When it comes to issues of compliance and governance, there are more people and processes at play. There is more decision making needed, more policies involved, and sometimes more of a mindset shift to make the adoption more sustainable and ultimately more successful. So that's because of that kind of complexity. Is the reasons that we deliver professional services around Microsoft Purview in the way that we do, which is around a proven kind of 5-step methodology that we've evolved as a partner over time, typically as a 12-month program to begin with. So as a partner, we will act almost as an extension to your compliance team, an extension to your IT team, joining them together and kind of filling skill gaps, time, capacity gaps, resource gaps around your adoption of Microsoft Purview. And we will always start that, and our approach is to always start that by giving you visibility of your current state of play across your data. What are you working with? What sensitive data have you got there? How are you using Microsoft 365 and some of these controls? And land you a roadmap for adoption through an assessment service. And then we can work in a flexible way to deliver our professional services to you if you need them at a leadership level, so driving kind of strategy for adoption and best practices, fly in my face, services around design and deployment of technical streams of work, but also services around sort of ongoing administration. So just to paint a picture, a bit of background, and the upshot of the program is that you get quite a lot of value for money on your licenses quicker and move the needle on your compliance maturity much quicker than perhaps you might do if you were running a deployment project alone. So that's enough about us as Cloud Essentials. I want to kind of turn the focus to you a little bit more. We've got a fantastic mix of organisations actually represented today, broad range from various verticals, from construction to finance to law to NHS, and also a really broad mix of professionals, which is fantastic, from DPOs, IT directors, legal counsel, data privacy, CISOs. So before we dive into Compliance Manager, as these features within Compliance Centre, I wanted to gauge your familiarity with this area and this interface that is available in Microsoft 365. So please scan the QR code with your phone to cast your vote. We're going to post a link in the chat, and yeah, let's have a vote to indicate, how often do you venture into Microsoft Compliance Centre? So I'm just going to pause and let you respond. No one's in the front. Oh no, some. Interesting. Great. Okay, so there's quite a few never, but you know about it. It's kind of at top, so that's great. So yeah, you're not active in there, but hopefully you've heard something about it, and perhaps that's piqued your interest in joining us today. I'll let that run because that'd be really interesting to see the kind of final outcomes. So thanks for that. So I suppose for the less familiar, let me just help you kind of navigate the terminology, orientate yourself a little bit around this this area of functionality before Navasha and Johan take us in a little deeper. So Microsoft Compliance Centre is the interface where you will find all of these features in Microsoft Purview. And unlike much of the sort of administration of your tenant, actually a lot in Microsoft Compliance Centre is designed to be used by non-technical professionals, those really responsible for data compliance and data governance. So Compliance Manager, the focus of today's session, is an online sort of toolbox that can be found within Compliance Centre. And it's designed to really help you improve your compliance posture and manage your activities and help you kind of maintain an inventory really and automate quite a lot of what would otherwise be quite a manual task. So under the hood of Compliance Manager, you'll find features that we're going to touch upon today, generally clustered around these 5 themes. The first being what Microsoft is doing towards compliance, because your data is living in Microsoft's data centers. So you need to know, and your regulators need to know what Microsoft is doing to protect your data and to comply with laws and standards. So here, you'll be guided towards the Microsoft Service Trust portal to see their internal control framework and how Microsoft is making their contribution. Secondly, through mapping of regulations, you can also assess your compliance position against many national, regional laws, but also standards, and benchmark yourself. And our team were involved several years ago in an advisory capacity to Microsoft when the South African data privacy regulations came in, so the equivalent to GDPR, the POPIA regulations. So we can certainly vouch for the very intensive process that Microsoft goes through to map regulations into Compliance Manager so that you can then have access to these assessment templates to align and benchmark to, and it's a continuous process of updating those. So the third kind of cluster of functionality within Compliance Manager is improvement actions. So these kind of suggestions on controls and tweaks that you can make to your settings. You also get to centralize the process of documenting controls that are being made and allocating responsibility for actions on the principle that it's a team effort managing all of these compliance controls. And finally, you can use it as a secure home for any documentation to upload around compliance. So that's in a nutshell what it is, and just a little bit more context as we now hand over to Navasha and Johan, who are going to, Navasha, I know you're going to kick off now, giving a perspective as a compliance officer on why we think you should become more familiar and venture more into Microsoft Compliance Center. So I'll hand presenting to you, Navasha.
Thanks, Laura. Please let me know. I'm just waiting for my screen to come up. So hi, everyone. When you hear anyone at Cloud Essentials say non-technical, they're referring to me. So if there are any other compliance risk professionals, you're not alone. Welcome. And everyone else, welcome to you too. So as Laura mentioned earlier, I'm the compliance lead for Cloud Essentials. And I'm going to be taking you through our methodology to an extent, but more so the basis of our methodology and how this impacts the compliance journey, but more importantly, how we use the powerful tool or tool suite of Microsoft Purview, and more specifically, the Compliance Manager to aid the compliance maturity journey. So we've developed, and Laura alluded to this earlier as well, a 5-step methodology to help organizations mature their compliance stance. And this is by leveraging the Microsoft Purview suite and the Compliance Manager. And if you want more information on our 5-step methodology, you can either chat to me directly after the session, or you can look at our previous webinar series. So our methodology focuses on incorporating 2 best practices in the assurance field. And if you're from the risk and compliance environment, these should be very familiar to you. And we take those best practice principles and we tie it to the Microsoft technology. So you'll see a common theme that comes across even with the presenting is compliance meeting technology and ensuring that we're always harmonizing as far as possible to create a seamless compliance journey. So the first of the best practice principles we always use is ensuring controls have a people, process, and technology element. And secondly, we ensure that all controls also have an element of the combined assurance model. So as you'll know, this seeks to incorporate and optimize all assurance services and functions, which includes the technology, so that taken as a whole, these enable an effective control environment. And as a compliance practitioner myself, I know how difficult it is for an organization to not only manage their regulatory compliance obligations, but also to create controls that will lead to an increased compliance maturity, because we're constantly chasing this target of being compliant. But how do we go beyond being compliant and actually be to be ahead of our game? How do we get ahead, and how do we stay on top of these things? So that's where the technology comes in handy. So why should we care? And I'm not embarrassed to admit that if I had to answer the Slido that Laura put up, I would easily have said, no, I've never heard of Compliance Manager. And it's such a shame, because just like me, you're probably wondering why you should care. And when there are tons of other GRC tools that might be able to help you, but embracing the technology to manage your compliance is something that many organizations and compliance professionals struggle with. And yet there's this amazing tool that's already at our disposal, because most people, including ourselves, use Microsoft Office, and the bulk of our company's data is already transacted through Office. So Compliance Manager and Purview by extension is a data protection, risk management, and unified compliance solution that you can use to stay on top of your compliance requirements and manage your data from a central point. The tools needed to assist you with your compliance journey, as Laura already explained, exist within the Compliance Manager suite. So according to a 2019 annual report from Thomson Reuters about the cost of compliance, there are more than 220 updates per day from 1,000 regulatory bodies all over the world. And staying on top of this would be a huge challenge without some help. And that's where Compliance Manager comes in. Compliance Manager really seeks to empower assurance professionals to understand the existing controls, to detect indicators of risk, to define the types of actions needed, and to assign ownership of controls, all from one central platform. So depending on your experience with GRC tools, this might happen across multiple systems or through multiple processes. With the Compliance Manager, you're able to do this from a single interface. So even if you have not yet set up anything in Compliance Manager, the Microsoft 365 default data protection baseline is already collecting signals from your Microsoft 365 solutions environment and actions you have taken on your compliance score journey. So I think that's the beauty of it. There's this tool that exists that's already running, helping you meet compliance requirements, that all you need to do is sort of tap into this. So it provides you with baselines, and these baseline assessments cover regulations such as your ISO 27001, as Laura explained earlier, POPIA, the GDPR. So there's really a whole bunch of assessments waiting for you to try and help you along your journey. Then it also allows you to take action. So these actions could include looking at your risk-based compliance score. So Microsoft intelligently calculates your score based on your risks, so that when you are working on things like your improvement actions or trying to improve your compliance score, you'll be able to work on the most critical actions first that are applicable to your business and to your compliance journey. So these actions could be technical or non-technical. And as Laura mentioned earlier, some of these actions are also managed already for you by Microsoft. So from a compliance officer perspective, or from a GRC perspective, what you're gaining is this visibility and this power to be able to assign controls that you're required to assign to. So if it's an internal control for a technical staff member, for example, or if it's a Microsoft managed control, having that ability to be able to place reliance on it. So all these actions are there to protect the confidentiality, integrity, and availability that the organization's systems, assets, data, and personnel. So there's also technical actions on there. So if I have to explain the different types, so technical actions on here could be using technology mechanisms such as recommending that you upgrade certain software or adding in firmware. But there's also non-technical elements for people like me, where you'd have to look at implementing certain documentations or certain policies, like an information security policy or an internet communications policy. But in addition to that, having the central interface also means that you can report seamlessly. So if you need to report on where you are in your journey at any given time, you're able to get a risk-based compliance score. You're able to allocate technical actions or non-technical actions. You're also able to identify what type of corrective actions you need to put in place. And I know Johan's going to cover that a little bit later. So whether it's a preventative, detective, or a corrective action needed to assist with your compliance journey. So over to you, Johan. Why should non-compliance people care about it?
Thank you, Devasha. So from a technical perspective, Compliance Manager really empowers IT professionals to engage with assured professionals to execute on minimizing risks using Microsoft Purview. This is important because within your compliance score and Compliance Manager, controls outside of compliance is also contributes to your score. So security within your Office 365 environment and also your broader Azure AD and Azure environment all contribute to your overall compliance score within Compliance Manager. It also, as you'll see later in our demo section today, it visibly allows you to prioritize improvement actions by giving you a risk-based approach of visually presenting improvement actions that you can complete to close your biggest risk within your environment. You'll also see later that within each improvement action, whether it's controlled by Microsoft or whether it controls you need to implement, there are links to Microsoft documentations that explains the controls and how to configuring, really empowering an IT professional to ensure when they design and implement the controls, they're doing it that aligns with best practice and recommendation that is applicable to the industry. And as we already mentioned, compliance and security implementation is an ongoing solution. It's not a implement and forget. What Purview Compliance Manager allows IT professionals to do is really monitor the effectiveness of our controls on an ongoing method, even with the ongoing changes in our standards, in our industry and regulations that applies to our industry that keeps on changing and our environment continuously growing and shifting as the industry matures. Compliance Manager builds and matures with that. So over to where Compliance Manager can be found. Like Laura already alluded to it, Compliance Manager is integrated in the broader Microsoft Purview solution stack that you can access from compliance.microsoft.com. We'll also place the link to this in the chat. But to gain access to Compliance Manager, you'll need to have your your tenant admin assign your permissions within Compliance Manager to be able to access it. But there's a subset of permissions dedicated to Compliance Manager within Microsoft Purview that enables you not to expose your elevated, broader Office 365 tenant roles and permissions to your compliance team, but there are dedicated roles within the Compliance Manager that you can assign to your compliance team so that they can perform the actions that is required to them, focusing only on the Compliance Manager. So what does Compliance Score actually tell you? So as you will see, once you open Compliance Manager, the first thing you see is your Compliance Score, which features prominently on your dashboard. It shows you a percentage base of points that you've achieved by implementing improvement actions already, or that Microsoft has implemented on Office 365 tenant for you. So as Devasha has already mentioned, this is based on the Microsoft 365 data protection baseline, which is takes input and controls from a baseline of elements, including NIST, ISO, FedRAMP, and GDPR. So what it basically do is it scans all the controls and configurations already on your tenant and indicates the improvement actions and controls you've already successfully implemented. It utilizes real-time scanning, where improvement actions is assessed if there's automated testing that we'll show later on in today's demo session to actually give you the points to your score to improve your overall compliance score. If you scroll down, you'll also get a more granular breakdown of your compliance score by category, such as information governance, how you are managing your devices, again, allowing you to focus on certain categories of improvement actions where you feel your organization has got the biggest risk based on the lower percentage score you've achieved. But how is compliance score actually calculated? Like Nivasha mentioned earlier, this is based on a breakdown of mandatory and discretionary controls, where mandatory are actions that cannot be bypassed, and those account for the biggest percentage of points you can achieve, whereas discretionary controls it relies on users to understand the policy and act accordingly. For example, a policy requiring users to lock their computer when they leave, that's a discretionary control because it relies on the end user. On top of that, there's also preventative, detective, and corrective controls that all builds your compliance score. And in the end, each control assigned a weighted point that you can achieve when addressing the improvement action, where the biggest points achievable or that can be achieved obviously will then be in the mandatory and preventative actions. So as you implement each of the recommended controls, you get these points allocated, which overall will increase your compliance score that you see on your dashboard. Back to you, Nivasha, to share and discuss how and when you can actually start utilizing your compliance manager and compliance score.
Thanks, Johan. So the compliance score, as you've seen already, is a powerful tool, and it can be used throughout various stages of your group risk or your governance risk and compliance process. And you could kick off, so depending on how your compliance process is aligned, so it could be used as an initial score when first activating your compliance manager. And as we've explained before, this will be based on the Microsoft 365 data protection baseline template. And this assists with understanding exactly what controls you have in place currently. So as we said, if you're already using Office 365, it's a matter of activating or adopting Microsoft Purview and activating your compliance manager. And you can also already see what controls you might have in place, what's managed by Microsoft versus what needs to be managed by your organization. So it serves as an excellent basis for a control gap analysis to start off with. So as we've mentioned, the initial score covers the most common data protection requirements, giving you an immediate sense of where you might stand on the compliance spectrum. And further, by providing this breakdown of controls, it could then take you to your next stage of your compliance journey, which is to help you decide what you can do to move it forward. But it also takes it a step further by assisting you with providing a risk-based approach to your improvement actions. So thirdly, the compliance score helps you along the control implementation journey by directing you to improvement actions that will lower your overall risk and increase your compliance score. Monitoring, as we all know, is a key part of any governance, risk, and compliance process. And it's not enough to implement controls, as Johan said, implement and forget. You need to actively check the adequacy and effectiveness of a control. The compliance score enables you to do that from a single interface, enabling you to implement improvement actions, and these improvement actions help centralize your compliance activities. So just a little bit on the improvement actions. Each improvement action provides recommended guidance that's intended to help you to align with data protection regulations and standards. The improvement actions can be assigned to users within the organization to perform implementation and testing. But further, you can also store documentation notes and record status updates within the improvement action, which will assist you with your next phase, which is most likely reporting. So the compliance score allows you as a GRC professional or an IT professional to provide your stakeholders with adequate progress reports. So if you're reporting to regulators or auditors alike, you can get a clear picture of where you are in your compliance journey by tapping into your compliance score. So now Johan and I, we are going to show you how we should use this, because we feel like this is the best way to actually bring the compliance manager to life. Johan? Okay, so Johan has set this up. So again, please bear with me. As I said, I'm not technical. So Johan will be playing the role of Alan, and he's an IT admin for this company, which is Contoso Electronics. And I'll be that of Megan Bowen, the compliance manager of our organization. So we find that this is the best way for clients to actually get a feel for the usability of the compliance score. So I'll be taking you through this demo, which involves the setting up of a baseline assessment, but across the demo, you'll also see some key features within Compliance Manager that could help you along your journey as well. And coming from, as I said, a non-technical role, the simplicity of the navigation within Compliance Manager is highly appreciated. So let's start. Okay, so we're going to click on Add Assessments. We're going to click on Assessments, apologies, and then we're going to go Add Assessment. From here, we can select Regulation. As you can see, here you will see a library of over 350 assessments you can select from. So in addition from being able to select an assessment, you can also modify an assessment to based on your custom needs, but you can also track, and that's based on what's most important for your organization and your risk and compliance universe. So this page lists the assessments you select to track for your organization. So as a financial institution, for example, you might check privacy legislation, or if you, in addition to the GDPR, POPIA, so if you are multi-geographical, you can select a number of these assessments. And what compliance score is, it increases your denominator to be tracked, so that you are tracked by all these different assessments. And the more assessments you add, the more improvement actions you will see on your improvement actions page. So don't be intimidated if there's a large number of improvement actions. It just means that you have that many more legislation that you already know you need to comply to. So for this example, I'm going to choose the FINRA cybersecurity checklist. There we go. I'll then create a name for our assessment and assign it to the appropriate assessment group. The next screen, for once I'm ahead of the technology. The next screen allows you to select the services the assessment will apply to. The services that currently can be accessed by or assessed by Compliance Manager is Microsoft 365, Microsoft Azure Cloud Services, Google Cloud Platform, and Amazon Web Services. So finally, once we've done that, we can now review and create the assessment. Once it's saved, we get the overview information of the new assessment. So I'm just giving it a minute or a second to save. There we go. Got a new assessment created. And once that's been done, here we go. We get an overview of the new assessment. So let's go back to the list of assessments and look at a previously created assessment, the data protection baseline for Microsoft 365. It opens the same page of the data protection baseline. It opens the same page for the data protection baseline, giving you more information on this assessment. You can then click into the controls tab to view the status of controls for this assessment grouped by family. If you scroll down the page, you can select a control family, for example, privacy compliance, and you can drill further down into privacy compliance DLP policies, for example. Now I can see a breakdown of key improvement actions in addition to the actions that Microsoft took to meet this control requirement on the right-hand side. If I click into the action, it will tell me if that's being managed by Microsoft. I can find detailed implementation notes and test notes from Microsoft. Clicking through, we can see, for example, use default DLP policies for US personally identifiable information data has failed and has failed medium risk status. Sorry, I'm still waiting for the technology to catch up a little bit. Here we go. So on the right-hand side, we can learn more about setting up this policy. And from there, I can easily go into the configuration page from the Launch Now deep link. I do apologize for the delay. Here we go. So on the right-hand side, as I said, you can learn more about setting up this policy. And from there, you can easily go into the configuration page from the Launch Now deep link. This will then take you directly to the configuration page where you can configure the settings, or alternatively, I can assign this action to the correct stakeholder in my organization to complete, which is what I will do by assigning it to Alan. But before I hand over to Johan to show you how I can complete the technical action that will improve our compliance score, I can still see all the various controls that this section is applicable to across all your assessments. Again, removing the need for duplicative work. So over to you, Johan, aka Alan. How can you use Compliance Manager to improve our score?
Thank you, Nivasha. So on screen, you can see I have logged in as Alan, and I would have received an alert that I've been assigned an improvement action. So let me open my mailbox and show you an example of the notification I would have received. You can see on top of my inbox, if I open the item, I get information around the improvement action that I need to implement. And if I simply click on the link within the email, I'll be taken directly to the Compliance Manager Center, the same view that Nivasha previously had, describing the improvement action. So let me open that. Cool. So as you can see, the same view as Nivasha is visible from the technical perspective. And as she described before, I can scroll through the information on the right-hand side, describing what technical implementation I need to complete to implement this control. I can also utilize the links further down on the right-hand side to gain more insight from a technical perspective of the implementation and the configuration actions I need to complete. It will take me through to Microsoft Docs that will provide me a step-by-step guide in most scenarios that I need to complete to implement this. But if I simply click on the Launch Now link, I would be taken to the area within Purview to implement this control, which is the Data Loss Prevention Admin Center within Microsoft Purview. So again, simplifying the managing and automating some of the controls by jumping directly to the correct area within Purview. So to implement this, I will create a data loss prevention policy by creating a policy. And what Microsoft Purview allows organization to do is to create data loss prevention policy, again, utilizing templates that you can see on screen shortly, as soon as Microsoft comes to the party. There you go. So the templates I need to implement based on the information I got from the compliance manager falls within the privacy templates. So if I scroll down and open privacy, I'll get a list of all the templates of data loss prevention policies I can implement. And this is obviously around the US personal identifiable information. I'll scroll down to it and select that. On the next screen, you've got the option to customize the name of the policy and also description to be more informative from an administrative perspective, as long as it meets Microsoft requirements. For this, I'll leave a default for the demo. What Microsoft Purview allows you to do, so you want to go back to that section, is it allows you to assign data loss prevention policies to administrative units. What administrative units are, you'll see on the next window, as soon as I get back to that window, is where you can assign controls to units within your organization. So if you have a multi-geographic location-based organization, administrative units you can create in Azure Active Directory will allow you to scope data loss prevention policies and other Purview controls to that specific administrative unit. So you don't need to have a single policy or a single control need to apply to your full organization. You can scope it using administrative units. On the next screen, you get a list of locations. Obviously, you can apply the data loss prevention policy too. For this one, I'll leave it default and click next onto the next section. Here, you've got the ability to customize your policy rule sets, where you can adjust the thresholds to meet your own business requirements, and this will trigger or not trigger the data loss prevention policy. So what this allows you to do is customize the limits. So for example, you might allow one ID number or one US passport number to be shared externally, but if it exceeds 5 items or 5 sensitive information types in a single email or single document, it will trigger the data loss prevention policy. But for the sake of this demo, I'm going to leave the default thresholds in place and continue on to the next window. You also have the ability to customize the information protection that you can apply on top of content that triggers this information data loss prevention policy. So you can apply encryption, other controls, and permission restrictions using data loss prevention policy. The next window allows you to customize the controls of your data loss prevention policy. For example, enabling the mail tips, but also sending incident reports to users. So here we always recommend you enable policy tips within data loss prevention policies so that it will show users interactively on their endpoint devices and within their Office 365 applications if they are working on content, emails and files that will be in breach of any data loss prevention policy. It empowers your end users a lot better. I also want to enable Nivasha or Megan to actually get an alert if the data loss prevention policy is triggered, as she's our compliance manager. So I'll add her to the incident report. You can also, on top of an incident report, also send alerts to a group of users within your organization or individual users. And to avoid alert fatigue, you can either leave the defaults for every time the rule is triggered, but also more granular flexibility of when alerts must be sent to the relevant stakeholders in your organization. The last window is just the controls around security you can implement, but for the sake of demo, I'm going to just skip on past it. The last window within creating a data loss prevention policy is turning it on. We always recommend in our data loss prevention policy journey, recommend that you always turn on new data loss prevention policies in testing mode. It allows you to assess it before you actually enforce any of the controls and limitations that might bring your organization to a grinding halt. So lastly, we get a review and summary of the policy. And if I click on submit, it will actually create the policy. Just waiting for it to finish. So here we go. If I click done, I'll get a view of all the data loss prevention policy from the Microsoft Purview Admin Center, including the new one that I've created. If I jump back to the Compliance Manager, I can then update the improvement actions that I completed today. So go there, jump to improvement actions. It allows me to also filter on only improvement actions that is assigned to me. So I don't have to scroll through the list of all improvement actions by simply filtering on my improvement actions. So there you go, select myself. If I open the one I've just implemented, I can then add implementation notes. And this can be any tasks that you want to track as along with your implementation steps. So I'll click on edit implementation details. And in here, I can add a note that I have created the data loss prevention policy, but with testing mode enforced at the current status. If you download the testing details, you'll actually get all these notes and dates that it was implemented through your audit trails of the improvement actions. I can also upload testing information, but as this improvement action utilizes automated testing, you'll see Microsoft does refresh all improvement actions once every 24 hours currently, but they are constantly working to make this closer to real-time monitoring, as mentioned before. If it was manual testing, I would have been able to upload the testing proof and proof of testing I've completed into the compliance manager to actually be evidence that you can utilize from a compliance perspective and when you're audited that you've actually implemented and tested your controls. You can see that on the last tab, I can click in where I can upload then evidence. So this, you can use this to upload documents such as a policy or design document that you used or created to implement and design the data loss prevention policy, but also to links that you can upload within your compliance manager as evidence of your control implementation. So that's basically it, how I would use Compliance Manager from a technical perspective to really implement the controls that I was assigned to by my compliance team and peers. I think over to you, Laura, to wrap up today and move on to our key takeaways.
Thanks, Johan. Yeah, so just to, I suppose, bring this session to a close and give you some points to take away on Compliance Manager. Johan, if you can move to the next slide, thank you. So I think when we were discussing this before the session, we were thinking, what would we want you to go away with, knowing that what we chose to do there was take you on quite a deep dive into, just going on one kind of pulling on one thread, taking you deep so that you could understand all of the capability in the technology. But having done that, we wanted to get the message across that don't be intimidated by it. If you're going to take away one thing from today, go and explore it, go and check it out, gradually start to familiarize yourself with what it's telling you. We think it's a massively overlooked feature set within Microsoft Purview. And even if you don't use it all, and however you choose to manage your people, process and workflow around Compliance Manager, there is quite a lot of value there. Which leads on to the next point to take away, really, which is use those baseline metrics that are there just waiting for you around regulation like GDPR. If anything, just use it as a conversation starter or a sort of catalyst to collaborate across IT and insurance roles within your organization on tackling some of the issues that it's raising. And thirdly, don't reinvent the wheel. Don't continue or start to do manually, maybe in spreadsheets, what Microsoft is doing for you automatically, and know that Microsoft are constantly reacting to changes in regulations and standards. So you really can have confidence in the information, the signals that are surfacing themselves in Compliance Manager. So just to leave you with an idea, Navasha hosts regularly what we call coffee break chats with compliance professionals who are exploring Microsoft Purview, trying to figure out what it is, how it works, how it fits together within the broader world of managing compliance. So please contact Navasha directly if you wanted to arrange that. Also, just to mention our next session in July, slightly more aimed at technical roles around the deployment of DLP. We've used an example of DLP today, those features to kind of prevent oversharing of sensitive data. So Johan is going to lead that session on the do's, the don'ts, the kind of lessons learned really from us in doing it quickly, but without cutting any corners, and doing it in alignment with best practices. So we're going to close out the session there. You can catch up on the series via our website. We've covered e-discovery in recent months, information protection, insider risk. We've covered our kind of methodology, as Navasha talked to. So I'm going to give an opportunity now to answer any questions. So we'll stop the recording now so that maybe you feel more comfortable to ask any questions. If you want to use the chat, use the Q&A, come off mute if you want to, if you're brave enough. And yeah, we'll close the kind of formal session there and just take a pause to see through any questions. But if you're leaving us now, thanks for joining.